So you're scrolling through puppy listings, and there they are. Two adorable littermates, curled up together in a perfect furry ball. Your heart melts. Why separate them when you could give both a home? They'll keep each other company while you're at work, grow up as best friends, and you'll have double the love, right? Hold that thought. What if those two puppies could end up hating each other so violently that one needs to be euthanized? What if they become so codependent that being apart for 5 minutes triggers panic attacks and property destruction? What if, despite your best efforts, they never truly bond with you or your family because they only have eyes for each other? This is the dark reality that thousands of dog owners face every year when they bring home littermates. The dog training world calls it Littermate Syndrome. And here's where things get really interesting. Scientists say it doesn't exist. There's literally zero peer-reviewed research on it. Not a single study. Yet professional dog trainers are practically screaming warnings about it, sharing horror stories of families torn apart, dogs permanently separated, and heartbreaking euthanasia decisions. So, what's really going on here? Is this a genuine behavioral condition that science has somehow missed, or is it the biggest myth in the dog world? Today, we're going deep into one of the most controversial debates in canine behavior, and what we found might completely change how you think about getting your next puppy. Let's start with something that might shock you. Littermate syndrome has absolutely no scientific backing. None. Zero. When researchers searched Google Scholar for any peer-reviewed studies on littermate syndrome in canines, they found nothing. Penn State Extension confirms this stark reality. The scientific literature on littermate syndrome is completely non-existent. Dr. Christine Calder, a veterinary behaviorist, doesn't mince words about this. She states that this syndrome is not recognized by veterinary behaviorists or other leading experts in the field. According to her, what people call littermate syndrome is more likely just the natural challenges of raising two puppies at the same time. But here's where it gets really interesting. Dr. Mark Bekoff, he's a professor emeritus of ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Colorado, goes even further. He calls littermate syndrome a myth that needs to be put to rest once and for all, and his reasoning is fascinating. He's studied wild canines for decades, wolves, coyotes, foxes, and he's never observed anything resembling this syndrome in the wild. Think about that for a second. Wolf pups grow up with their siblings in family packs all the time. If littermate syndrome were a natural phenomenon, wouldn't we see it in wolves? The only somewhat relevant scientific study comes from way back in 1974, when researchers Scott and Fuller examined dominance relationships between littermates. They found some breed differences in how siblings interact, but nothing that resembled a behavioral syndrome requiring intervention. So, if science says it doesn't exist, why are so many professionals absolutely convinced it does? While scientists demand evidence, professional dog trainers are dealing with something very real in their daily practice. And they're not just seeing random problems, they're seeing consistent, predictable patterns that follow specific timelines and often end in tragedy. Jeff Stallings, a certified professional dog trainer, describes how two puppies' deep bond actually prevents them from learning how to communicate properly with both humans and other dogs. Patricia McConnell, an applied animal behaviorist, puts it bluntly, the puppies become so obsessed with each other that you become the odd man out. It becomes harder to get their attention, harder to teach them emotional control, and harder to establish any boundaries. Dr. Ian Dunbar, and this guy is both a veterinarian and a dog behaviorist, doesn't sugarcoat it. He calls littermate syndrome a disaster waiting to happen. He emphasizes that raising littermates isn't just twice the work, it's exponential. The problems compound on each other. Here's something that really drives home how serious this is. Even highly experienced guide dog organizations, with professional trainers working full-time with these puppies, couldn't consistently prevent littermate syndrome. Many have completely stopped placing littermates together because the failure rate was so high. So what exactly are these trainers seeing that has them so worried? Professional trainers report a remarkably consistent progression of problems that follows developmental stages. It typically starts with subtle signs between 8 and 16 weeks old. The puppies seem overly dependent on each other. They can't settle down unless their sibling is right there. If you separate them for even a few minutes, they start whining or howling. During training sessions, they're constantly distracted by each other instead of focusing on you. Then comes the 6 to 18-month period, and this is when things start getting serious. the separation anxiety becomes severe. We're talking property destruction, self-harm, absolute panic when separated. Many dogs develop something called neophobia, an extreme fear of anything unfamiliar. New people, new dogs, new places, everything becomes terrifying because they've been so focused on their sibling that they never properly explored and adapted to the world around them. But the real crisis often hits around 18 months when dogs reach social maturity. This is when the fighting starts. And we're not talking about playful tussles. Professional case studies document fights so violent they require emergency veterinary treatment. The aggression escalates in both frequency and severity. Here's a particularly sobering statistic. Behavioral therapists report that female littermate pairs have approximately a 60% likelihood of developing serious problems. Same-sex pairs in general show higher risk than opposite-sex siblings. The dogs also develop severe resource guarding, competing aggressively over food, toys, attention, even space. And here's the really sad part. This competition often ruins their ability to interact with any other dogs for the rest of their lives. Let me tell you about April from Utah. She's been managing 2 female littermates for 5 years now, and her story shows just how extreme this can get. She did everything right from the start. Separate crate training in different rooms, individual feeding, separate training sessions. She followed all the prevention protocols. But at 18 months, Littermate Syndrome hit anyway. The dogs had vicious fights. In one fight, one dog lost a tooth against her sister's skull. After 5 years of trying everything, here's what April's life looks like now. Her house is physically divided with separate entrances. The dogs alternate living spaces every other day and never, ever meet. Each parent takes one dog daily. Both parents work from home because the dogs can't be left alone due to separation anxiety. Neither dog can interact with other dogs anymore because their negative sibling experiences ruined their social skills forever. Then there's the story from the Hibbard House blog. They had 2 puppies named Buffy and Sally, not even actual littermates. Just 2 puppies raised together from a young age. Over 18 months, these dogs bonded so intensely with each other that they essentially ignored their human family. Buffy became a destructive escape artist. Sally became anxious and fearful. The breaking point came when Buffy started stalking their newborn grandchild like prey. They had to immediately rehome Buffy. And here's the kicker. Within days of separation, Sally completely transformed. She became confident, well-adjusted, a totally different dog. The most heartbreaking case involves 2 border collies named Lexi and Abby. They were actually acquired 5 months apart and lived peacefully for 18 months. Then the fighting started. First fight was minor. Second fight required 10 staples and 2 drains. Third fight resulted in severe bite injuries to their owner. Abby was deemed unadoptable due to the severity of her attacks. Lexi was placed in rescue, but ultimately had to be euthanized due to fear-based reactivity and inability to function independently. These aren't rare horror stories. Trainers see these patterns repeatedly. Now, success stories do exist, but they reveal just how much work is required. Canine Behavioral Services documented a case with 2 male Dalmatians who started fighting at just 12 weeks old. One was deaf, adding extra complexity. Through intensive professional intervention, they achieved remarkable results. No fighting after the second training session, and both developed into well-behaved 8-month-old puppies living successfully together. But look at what this required. Immediate professional intervention within days of the first fight. 3-hour training sessions with the entire family present. Strict protocols limiting physical affection. Completely restructured daily routines. Ongoing professional support. This wasn't a DIY solution. It required extraordinary commitment and resources. Even April's successful management, after 5 years, shows that success might actually mean accepting permanent lifestyle changes and extreme environmental modifications rather than truly resolving the underlying issues. For families absolutely determined to raise littermates despite all warnings, professionals have developed an intensive protocol. It's called the 80-20 rule. 80% of all activities must be conducted separately during the first 6 months, with only 20% allowing sibling interaction. This means individual crate training in separate rooms, separate feeding arrangements, individual walking schedules. One dog goes for a walk while the other stays home. Separate training classes. Yes, you need to enroll them in different classes or attend the same class twice. Solo socialization experiences. one-on-one playtime while the sibling is crated elsewhere. Texas A&M veterinary researchers emphasize that owners must take intentional steps to allow puppies to bond with them and develop as individuals. The protocol starts by keeping puppies together their first week for comfort in the new environment, then gradually implementing separations. You start with side-by-side crates that slowly increase in distance over weeks and months. Professional trainers warn this approach triples the workload rather than simply doubling it. The financial investment is staggering. Individual training sessions at $100 to $150 per session per dog. Separate boarding costs when you travel, professional behaviorist consultations at $200 to $500. And this might require lifetime maintenance, not just puppy training. Time-wise, you're looking at 4 to 6 hours daily for properly managed littermates versus 2 to 3 hours for a single puppy. Can you really commit to that every single day? Not all breeds are equally susceptible. Border Collies and Australian Shepherds, high-drive working breeds, show particular vulnerability. Their intense focus and herding instincts seem to amplify sibling dynamics. Professional trainers suggest that calmer breeds with lower drive might experience fewer issues. But even traditionally easy breeds aren't immune. Golden Retriever forms are full of littermate horror stories, with constant fighting beginning as early as 10 weeks old. This challenges the idea that only high-energy breeds are at risk. Sex combinations show clear patterns too. Female-female pairs consistently show the highest aggression rates. Male-female pairs tend to establish more stable dominance hierarchies with less fighting. Male-male pairs fall somewhere in between. So, what do the skeptics think is really going on? Kayla Fratt's analysis suggests that what people call Littermate Syndrome actually results from inadequate management, insufficient individual socialization, poor environmental management, inadequate alone time training, failure to meet each dog's individual needs. Behavior matters. Academy argues the label itself is the problem. When we blame Littermate Syndrome, we absolve ourselves from responsibility for problems that humans created through poor management. Mark Beekoff's observations about wild canines are particularly compelling. Wolf packs are actually family units where siblings naturally develop cooperatively rather than competitively. If Littermate Syndrome were natural, we'd see it in wolves. But we don't. Critics also point out selection bias. Trainers primarily see problem cases, creating skewed perceptions. Many breeders successfully raise multiple littermates without issues when proper individual attention is provided. This debate has real consequences beyond individual families. Human Animal Support Services points out that 1.5 million animals are euthanized in U.S. shelters annually. Policies refusing to adopt littermates together may worsen overcrowding by creating unnecessary barriers to adoption. Many rescues and shelters have implemented strict no-littermate policies based on these concerns. But are we preventing successful placements while contributing to euthanization of adoptable animals? The better safe than sorry mentality among professionals might partly stem from liability concerns. Individual training also commands higher fees than group sessions, creating potential economic incentives for promoting the syndrome narrative. So, what should you actually do if you're considering littermates? The overwhelming professional consensus remains strongly against it. Most certified trainers, veterinary behaviorists, and animal welfare organizations recommend sequential adoption with 12 to 18-month age gaps. This allows your first dog to reach social maturity, complete training, and establish strong bonds with your family before introducing a second dog. If you're absolutely determined to proceed with littermates, you need brutal honesty about your capabilities. Do you have previous multi-dog experience? Can you dedicate 4 to 6 hours daily to separate training activities? Do you have strong financial resources for doubled expenses plus professional intervention? Are you willing to permanently separate the dogs if problems develop? High success probability requires experienced multi-dog owners with ample time, strong financial resources, and professional support already in place. First-time dog owners, those with limited time or money, or anyone expecting the dogs to entertain each other while they're at work, these are high-risk situations where professionals strongly recommend against littermates. So, where does this leave us? The Littermate Syndrome controversy reveals something fascinating about how we understand animal behavior. We have zero scientific research, yet hundreds of professional trainers reporting consistent, predictable patterns. We have skeptics calling it a myth, while families are dealing with very real behavioral crises. Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. The behaviors attributed to Littermate Syndrome likely result from complex interactions between breed temperament, individual personality, environmental management, and owner expectations. It might not be a medical syndrome, but that doesn't make the challenges any less real for families experiencing them. The safest approach remains clear: sequential adoption with adequate age gaps, allowing each dog individual development time and strong human bonding opportunities. For those committed to raising siblings together, success requires extraordinary dedication, immediate professional intervention at the first sign of problems, and acceptance that permanent separation might ultimately be necessary. The most honest assessment may be that Littermate syndrome represents less a medical condition than a management challenge, one that tests the limits of even experienced dog owners and often exceeds the capacities of average families just looking for canine companionship. Before you bring home those two adorable puppies, ask yourself, are you prepared for the possibility that they might need to live completely separate lives? Are you ready for potentially years of intensive management? Can you handle the heartbreak if it doesn't work out? The choice is yours, but now you know what you might be signing up for. If this video helped you make a more informed decision about your next puppy or puppies, please hit that like button. And subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating and sometimes controversial world of dog behavior. Have you had experience with littermates? Drop your story in the comments below. Whether it was a success or a struggle, your experience could help someone else make the right choice. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for two puppies is to let them find separate homes where they can each become the amazing individual dogs they were meant to be.